Hey there. Today, we're talking about the quarterly execution planning meeting. It's such an important meeting in the rhythm of meetings. And today, we're going to go through a few different areas that you can include in your quarterly execution planning meeting and why they matter. So first of all, we're going to give it a bit of distinction around why it matters to have it as a 1 or 2 day and what it does in terms of answering what are our priorities, and without that context, what we're going to miss. So we're going to step into how and why to do a previous quarter's review. We're going to talk about the next item on the agenda, how and why you need to have core ideologies, why you need to cover this off at the quarterly, and then the importance of reviewing, testing, and maybe even evolving your strategy using some of the strategic tools that are available, and then the importance of resolving big issues so that they can align with the priorities for the next 90 days. And then sometimes, in fact, almost all of the time, we decided that we include a learning component. So we talk about the importance of having a learning component in the quarterly meeting. And then finally, the importance of always leaving with a 90-day execution plan for the individual, for the company, for the department. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Hey there, welcome to the Growth Whisperers, where everything we talk about is building enduring, great companies. That is, companies that will endure, companies that will be great. Every week, Kevin Lawrence and I talk about this, and here he is, the man himself, Kevin Lawrence. G'day, Kevin. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Brad. I'm really enjoying this series that we're doing around meetings because we spend so much of our time, helping to drive these meetings. And we also know people get driven crazy by ineffective meetings. So I'm really enjoying this.
Yeah, indeed. So we always like to start with a word or phrase of the day. What have you got today?
Challenged is the word. Challenged. It's interesting that we take things for granted in where I live in Vancouver. I live between two places, Vancouver, another place called Kelowna. All the roads washed out in a big storm, and there's 4 major roads that go from Vancouver back and forth. And I'm hearing that we might not, these are highways, that these highways may not be available unless it's essential use for months, many months. Yes. So it's interesting. So as I'm planning, and I used to drive back and forth every week between these 2 areas. And so now I got to fly because I actually can't. I could drive once. I could bring one vehicle through because it could be heading to my house. And I might be able to push the rules, but they've only got one of them open, and they're trying to make it for all the essential goods, including, fuel, because one of the pipelines, I think, was shut down. So it's wild. It's you drive these roads all the time. You never even contemplate them not being available. And so it's really, so I would say logistically challenged myself, I guess would be the way to put it. It's as I was looking at my calendar for the month of January, February, March, I just started going, okay, I really got to think about this. How is this going to work? Yeah. Anyways, it's interesting. First world problems, but problems nonetheless in my mind.
Well, mine is, you're only as good as your weakest part. And so I had a flat tire in a car yesterday, something that I haven't had for a very long time. And I've got a German car, and I won't name the make. But yeah, getting a flat tire a few hours from home in the country was not fun. And it just, it reinforced some of the frustrating things about an exotic car, or a car that's not really built for these conditions, I guess is what I'd say. And that made me think that you're only, in our offerings, people see all of the parts, and you're only as good as your weakest part.
Right. So we both have something in common, Brad. If we sew these together, our logistics system is only good as the weakest part of the road. And so when part of the road washes out, the road's useless. When part of the car doesn't function, it's useless. So and hence why airplanes and many things have backup systems, redundant systems. So if one goes down, you're still good to go.
Indeed. Indeed.
Awesome.
Okay.
Let's jump in. So quarterly meetings, the quarterly execution planning meeting, a critical meeting, one that, that we've been part of hundreds. I'm pretty safe to say, if I did the math, it's thousands of these that I've been involved in. They can be incredibly effective. They can be incredibly ineffective if you're not careful. Normally, when they're ineffective, it's because the agenda has not been well designed and or people aren't well prepared, or the person supposed to be running the meeting isn't that effective themselves.
They need to be effective. We operate on 90-day sprints. This is the second in this 5-part series talking about the meeting rhythm. Last week, we did the annual strategic thinking meeting, which is a 2 to 3 day typical meeting. But this is about the quarterly execution planning meeting. And so whatever our strategy is that's been determined from the annual meeting, this is where we get down to the real execution planning. This is where we get to identify what it is that is worthy of effort in the next 90 days for the company, for the departments, for the individuals, so that we can give ourselves the best chance of success.
Yeah, it's an absolutely critical meeting and a critical discipline to take time every 90 days to reset the plan, because the annual plan you have is a great hypothesis. Things change. You learn new things. Never mind, market conditions might change, or internal factors would change that might need different types of attention. So, yeah, critical meeting, and the key things is it's 1 to 2 days every 90 days. It's a serious commitment, but it's the time when you bring everyone back together. You take and are held accountable, or hold yourself accountable for what you committed to last time. And then as a result, there's learning and improvements that will come out of it every single time if you run the meeting right.
It's not very often that I go new age, but I've got a theory about the effectiveness of quarterly execution planning meetings and why they're quarterly. And that is that our body, our mind, has evolved over millions, if not tens of thousands of years. And every 90 days, the season changes. And so, spring, summer, autumn, winter. And so my theory is that at a biological level, we need to operate in these types of 90-day sprints. And that's why it's not 60 or 70 days and why it's not 110 days. That's why, because at a biological level, it feels right for us to have change after 90 days. And it feels like that's something that's achievable.
So the biologist in Brad says it's because of the changing seasons. And the logical thinking in me goes, well, someone tried doing it twice a year and it wasn't enough. So they said, well, let's do it twice more. So who knows how it works? I think yours sounds much more intelligent. The fact of the matter is there's a point of where we just need to recalibrate. We've got some companies who do mini versions monthly. If they're really moving quickly, people can drop it down to monthly. The thing is, it takes time to really reflect properly. So the more frequently you do it, it can be beneficial. It also can be challenging. So let's look at the key things that we want to do. First of all, ideally, you're off-site, not in your office. Again, just like with an annual, you get distracted when you're in the business. So ideally, getting out of the business. Now, many people are also doing a lot of these virtually. Over COVID, people figured out you could. We run so many meetings virtually on a quarterly basis, and many companies are going to continue to keep them virtual because it's very effective and efficient. You just don't get all the relationship building piece and the bonding that comes out. But the idea is, aside from it being critical and a reset, the first point, though, is that it matters because it really helps us to be accountable to what we did, and then to identify what our next set of priorities are. What are our next marching orders? What are our next set of goals or priorities for the next 90 days? So we're all crystal clear and aligned on that. So that's number one, the most important output. What are we going to do next?
Stuff happens between the annual and the first quarterly, or the first and the second quarterly, that stuff means that the priorities that we thought we might have 90 or 180 days ago or whenever it is, they will change. And so this answers the question, what are our priorities?
Yeah. The second, major point is how the meeting starts. It's a look back. It's a review of how we did. It's an accountability session. We committed to these things. How did we actually do? And then evaluating both the financials, how we did on our goals, a review of our people. How are our people performing and what do we need to adjust with our people? And just taking a look at these different aspects of our business and seeing what is really working and what Jim Collins would call is mining the brutal facts. What are either the really good opportunities or the things that are maybe challenging and not working? Interestingly, in that review, we often have people do a talent review of their key seats or key leaders that they present and what they're going to do to strengthen that team. We also do a bit of a culture review. We have a mini pulse survey that we do, either 1, 2, or 3 layers deep in an organization to see what's going on and how the other people are thinking and feeling at this time so that we're not caught by surprise or we're not thinking that we're leading the teams well, but really creating problems. So it's, some companies get deeper, some stay a little bit more simpler, but the key is a true reflection of how you've been performing.
And so you touched on the brutal facts. So we've done an episode on that, episode 59, Confront the Brutal Facts, Jim Collins' method for team hygiene. So you can refer back to that and what that means. It's such an important part, confronting the brutal facts at every single quarterly workshop.
It's an agenda point on Mural digitally or a flip chart on paper where we make a list every single meeting. Sorry, Brad, I jumped in there too quickly and you're in the middle of saying something.
No problem. No. That's exactly what we do. You've got to have it as a part of your quarterly agenda.
Yep.
And so we move on to, we've got the quarterly review, the previous quarter's review. We move on to the core ideologies. So what are the core values? Stories. What are the core purpose stories? People aligned. What are the actions to live, as we would say? So how do we get more people to understand the values and the purpose and the BHAG more deeply?
Yeah, and there's a piece of that we do when we do our culture review, that pulse survey. It gives us some other things that we actually mine, the brutal facts and a few other things. But just knowing that we got to keep breathing life into this culture and these core ideologies, because if not, guaranteed, they become corporate wallpaper. Just blah, 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 up on the walls and posters that aren't being lived and breathed and felt in the organization, and we got to keep helping it along.
And so then once we've covered off the core ideologies, we move to the next point that we have to consider in a quarterly execution planning meeting to review and test the strategy. Remember that we've set the strategy at the annual and we've evolved the strategy at the annual strategic thinking meeting. And so how are we performing in context to that? Or maybe we're going to test some aspects. Perhaps we're going to dig into the 5 forces or use another tool. Perhaps we're going to evolve if we're a bit earlier in this, the program, let's say, or the journey. Perhaps we're going to evolve what is our understanding of the flywheel or whatever concept or tool we're using. So there's some time that's allocated in there to review and to test and to ideate on our strategy.
Yeah, and then the next piece is to resolve big issues. We call it strategic discussions, having time when we're all together to debate really, really important things. So one of the last meetings where I was in with this, we were debating the COVID policy. 1, what was the policy? But 2, how do we roll it out properly, being mindful of our own values and the respect that we have for people on our team? But it could be that acquisition that you want to do, or it could be a new type of customer that you want to open up and start working with, or it could be a new strategic partnership or piece of, who knows? There's always debates that core team needs to have to help us to get clear on what we need to do to continue to win. Could be around strategy, execution, doesn't matter, but time to dig in. And in one of the companies I work with, we spend of 2 days, a day and a half just debating key strategic things so we can align and decide and move forward.
Think about it this way. If you're going to reset, if we've covered off what happened last quarter, and there are some things in the business that we have to incorporate into our quarterly priorities. So we can't really set our quarterly priorities until we've covered off, debated, argued, decided on a few items. That's the kind of stuff that we're talking about.
Yeah. It's critical. And it's the time when we're together and we can do it. Often someone will make a presentation. My rule of thumb is 10 minutes. You got 10 minutes to present and then we can debate it. But it's debate, get the best ideas and align and make a decision, or debate, get the best ideas, and then the person in charge will take those and run with it. Number 6 is learning. Whenever we can make it work, we like to get the whole team reading a book. And whatever that book is, a book relevant to how we want to or what we need to do to win this year. And then we have a discussion around it, what the learning is from it, which helps to make sure people read it or listen to it. And then talking about how we can apply this. So, for example, we did a meeting last week, and we had all read, there's a simple summary book of Porter's work, that cartoon book called What is Strategy? And we sat and we discussed it. And we went through it and had a conversation about what was valuable about it. What do we think about this in our context? And then what do we need to do? Not shockingly, some insights from our book ended up, this organization now wants to do the 5 forces, which they haven't done yet. And it's got everyone thinking more about competitive strategy versus selling in a potentially in a what would be called a red ocean. But the point of it is having a discussion, and then at the end we pick the one. What are we going to read next quarter? Now, either it's a discussion, someone presents it, whatever it happens to be, but it's really, really key to have time where we learn together and grow together. And if it fits in the agenda, it's very powerful.
Yeah. Learning. Here's the thing about learning that people may not consider. Imagine if this stuff actually works. Imagine, right? Well, the revenues grow, the margins grow, the size of the team grows, the complexity grows. In that environment, we need to stay ahead of that curve, and that means everyone in the leadership team has to continually learn how to do their job better, how to become more effective as leaders, because most times, most of the people in most of the jobs are at the highest level in a firm that they've been before, most of the time.
Yes.
And so therefore, we're always breaking new ground in terms of things that we're learning. And so we need to curate that as a leadership team.
Yeah, and often we need to relearn it. We'll go back and read books again in a lot of these companies. We need refreshers. Or there's new people on a team that haven't read these things. So super powerful port, and it's a discipline just to continue to stay sharp. And although it's not enough, we need more learning than just that, but that's a good start.
Yeah, and then we move on to the 90-day execution plan. And so that is the priorities, the smart priorities for the company, for the department, for the individual. Now, I like to say that all through our time together, a day, some companies have 2 days, we're looking through all of these different lenses to identify potential priorities, even through the strategic review, even through the brutal facts, everything that we're doing, we're trying to find any potential priorities. And then toward the end of the session, we get this whole collective of ideas that we can then categorize, and maybe some get thrown out, but we've got some real substance to work with in order to set our 90-day plans. So everybody should be walking away with a individual, smart set of goals, ideally 3 to 5, department and company.
Yep. And the idea, as you mentioned, Brad, as you go through the meeting, you're looking for the things that need to become goals, or some stuff doesn't. A lot of stuff just might be a little task that someone does, or we leave it and deal with it in the future. But we got to boil down to a set of commitments that we're all going to march towards. So the quarterly meetings are outstanding. And some people say, why do you need to do it every 90 days? It's because it works. It becomes this learning and growth flywheel for the business where you evaluate, get a little bit smarter, get realigned, and then go and do it again. And it starts to get fragmented, but every 90 days you're coming back and resetting. I love that discipline. And we've got a whole bunch of people on our team that do these for companies, and they have us do them for years, if not decades. Because the bigger piece of this is organizing and running these meetings is a job. It's a project. It takes a lot of prep and skill. And so a lot of people would rather outsource it to experts like us to run these meetings. forgetting even the content and perspective and expertise we have because we've helped so many companies. Just the basic of having someone to run an effective meeting and make good use of your time is incredibly, incredibly valuable.
Awesome. So let's move to review the quarterly execution planning meeting. 1 to 2 days. It matters because it answers the question, what is the priorities? What are the priorities for the business, the individual, the department, etc.? And that is a really important question because it tells us where to focus our effort. And there's no shortage of distractions out there. So the first point in the agenda is that we go through and do a previous quarter review. And then next, we're talking about the core ideologies. Kevin, do you want to take us on to the next one?
Yeah. We review and test the strategy. We're almost always working on some different strategic models, and we'll review and test and update the pieces that we're working on to make sure that they're still relevant, or updating them with data we've got from testing things in the field. Then we go and debate and resolve key issues, whether it's solving a problem or getting aligned around key things that we need to do and be on the same page with. Then we have time for learning so we can learn and grow and get smarter together. And whether we're learning something for the first time or we're going back and refreshing and learning again to touch up our skills. And then finally dropping it into a 90-day execution plan where the rubber hits the road. We have a plan for the company, a plan for each of the teams, and ideally a plan for each of the individuals. So everyone is crystal clear on their marching orders for the next 90 days.
All right. Do you want to close us out?
Yeah, for sure, Brad. Thanks. So, hey, I hope you've enjoyed this show. Thanks for listening. This has been the Growth Whisperers podcast with Brad Giles and Kevin Lawrence. You can get each of us on our newsletters, and you should, because we got newsletters sharing our best insights on a weekly basis. Brad's you can find on his website, evolutionpartners.com.au. Also more about Brad and what they do at his firm. And same for myself, Kevin. You can get it at lawrenceandco.com. Lots of free resources. Learn about what we do and get newsletter to help you to stay sharp and continuing to build an enduring great company. Hope you have an awesome week. See you next week.